Thanks, everyone, for attending this DABCC Live episode. I'm really excited. We have EG Innovations on the line with us. And like I mentioned, I've been following these guys. These guys have been around for a long time and make just a really, truly amazing solution for helping us, really get to the bottom of what's going on in our environments. It's really a completely different world out there today than it was when EG started and when I started in the Citrix world and the virtualization cloud world. Nowadays, IT teams have just tons of challenges, within their environments because of all the different moving parts, right? And all the different, the independencies, the different components that are out there. And what we need is a complete 360-degree visibility into that, from the application to the network to the hardware, to everything out there, to give you guys a solution that can solve the problems that we face and make it to where people don't say, hey, this is Citrix's fault. We need a solution that can say, hey, this is the problem here. So that's what these guys are going to talk about today. Again, as always, we want to make this an audience participation project, so please feel free to use the questions piece to go to webinar to ask questions. I will monitor those, and I'll interrupt these guys when it's appropriate. On that note, I'd like to introduce Holger, and he is the VP of Marketing and one very, very smart guy, and he's going to take it from here, and then he will introduce Bala, who's the true brains behind EG. And so with no further ado for me, Holger, it's all yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Doug. All right. Well, I'm going to just introduce real quick the agenda, the things we're going to talk about today, and spend maybe a minute or two on EG Innovations in case you don't know the company. So today we're going to talk about Citrix and Citrix environments. And whenever we do webinars or talk to customers, one of the biggest challenges that always comes up and is mentioned is user experience, right? So at the end of the day, applications and processes need to deliver value and need to be available to users, need to be responding, quickly. And whenever experience issues pop up, the first question is, where's the problem, right? Is it really Citrix, or is it in many cases, rather a problem in the underlying infrastructure? Is it the network? Is it the database, storage, right, application servers, what have you? And so Bala is going to explain how the complexity of today's Citrix environments really requires, next generation performance monitoring solutions to get to the core of user experience issues and deliver, maximum user satisfaction. And he'll show us how to really, from a Citrix administrative perspective, right, how to become a Citrix performance hero. Basically, how to not only very quickly and easily diagnose across your entire environment what the root cause and bottleneck is, but also do that proactively, right, before users call, before things spin out of control and slow down application access, so that you can fix issues before they really surface and manifest themselves. And let's go to the next slide. Take a quick look at EG Innovations so you know who we are and what we're talking about when we talk about performance monitoring. So in a nutshell, EG Innovations delivers intelligent, next generation, if you will, performance monitoring solutions that truly revolutionize how companies can diagnose and then fix and definitely prevent performance issues, right, in complex virtualized NT environments. We make performance management much faster, much easier, and less expensive than other approaches, and Bala will show you how we do that. EG Innovations has been helping over 1,000 enterprise customers with their performance monitoring needs all over the world. We've been doing this for over 10 years. We have offices in the US, the UK, Netherlands, Singapore, India, so we truly have a global footprint and helping our customers worldwide. On your screen, you can see a couple of highlights, a couple of customer logos, and that's really just a fraction, but it gives you an idea of the type of customers that we serve. And without further ado, let me introduce Bala Vaidyanathan to you, who will take a closer look at some of the Citrix performance challenges and how to diagnose and fix them, and what kind of tools will help you to make that job much easier and faster. Bala is the chief architect of the EG Enterprise Performance Management Solution, and he's been involved in some of the most complex Citrix and virtualization projects in the world. So he has a lot of experience in this field, and he will share some of his insight. He will go through again some examples of performance issues, how to address them, how to get full visibility into your environment, how to quickly diagnose and repair performance issues, and I think you'll find this very interesting. So without further ado, Bala, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Holger, and thanks, Doug, for giving us the platform and inviting us to do this, and thanks everybody for joining in or whoever is listening to the recording later on. So let's get right to it. What you see up on the screen is essentially the problem that we will be trying to address today. The user performance. No matter what we do, this is the one that needs to be optimal, needs to be fantastic for our projects to be successful. And fundamentally, the way users look at it is whatever performance you're giving to me through your Xen environment, whether it's XenApp, Xen Desktop, whatever the case might be, it has to be better than or as good as my PC. In most cases, it has to be better than, otherwise they want their device back. So essentially, the idea is how do we focus on performance to make sure the user experience is always optimal, at the same time not really compromise on your ROI, and do all of this in a manageable way. Let's take a look back at where we came from for a quick perspective. As Doug was talking about, when we started on this journey really long time back, things were much different. There was XenApp server in physical environments, and a bunch of other support servers were still around, Active Directories, your applications, your ZDCs, and all those different things. And they were all dependent, interconnected with each other. Even at that time, managing this environment was reasonably challenging. Now, as we went on, when XenApp servers went on virtualized platform, the complexity of the underlying infrastructure dramatically increased. The user still was logging into a console, basically, and getting everything that they needed. From their perspective, they're just doing simple login, and they get what they need. But underneath it all, there were a lot of moving pieces that need to work together in cohesion for the user to have a good user experience. An Active Directory slowdown could completely ruin your user experience. Something problematic with your SAN, something totally out of your Citrix environment could still impact your Citrix experience dramatically. So virtualization added a couple of additional failure points. Now, Xen Desktop, so if you bring desktop into the mixture, the environment gets even more complicated. There is more things that could potentially fail. There are a lot of other moving parts, and the user needs to get the same kind of experience that they got in their physical desktop. So the challenge is, even though we were able to provide, we are still able to provide a richer user experience, a more nuanced session experience, and it's become much easier for the user to make use of their sessions and harvest the power of the processing. It still, from a management standpoint, was very complex because of all these different moving parts and how many sheer number of different types of applications that are working together to deliver the service. Let's take a deeper look into virtualization. Now, we know Citrix essentially provides a layer of resource sharing. So you can have everything centralized and on a shared resource, and different users can use their own stuff, be on their own session, run their own applications on the shared resource, but without feeling like they're actually in a shared resource. Now, when you introduce virtualization, you're basically introducing another layer of resource sharing into that mix. So now there is a resource sharing that's happening at the hardware layer, and then there is another layer resource sharing happening at the operating system layer. So potentially any problem that can happen in any of these layers could impact what is going on with the user experience. Here you see a simple example where a database server is choking the hard drive that is affecting the XenApp environment that is running on top of it, obviously affecting the XenApp users. So you need to be cognizant of this complexity and how these different applications and infrastructures play with each other when you're trying to manage your XenApp systems today. Now, future. It's not going to get simple, is it? Introducing bring your own device. So all different types of SaaS and web applications, all different types of mobile and different types of applications and devices that can consume these applications, and the different architectures and the software that is needed to deliver those services. So it is going to get more and more complicated. So the future kind of looks like this. So this is the Flexcast management architecture that's coming up in Xen Desktop 7, and how a simple login process, what exactly is the process doing through the different applications that you have, and what is the sequence of events that happens. I mean, it's more complex than it looks. I know the diagram looks pretty complex, but that's what we are dealing with, essentially. From a user, all they see is username, password, and I see my apps, and I see my user session. But there is a lot of stuff that goes on behind the screens for them to get that experience, and the onus is on us to manage this environment effectively. Now, this is the problem that we deal with most of the times, right? The desktop can user having simple user experience issues. And when that happens, the fundamental issue with a complex infrastructure and with multiple underlying applications working with each other is, where do you start? Where is the real problem? Is it in the network? Is it in the SAN? Is it in Citrix? Is it in, where is the problem? And more often than not, most of you would have had experience with this, where you get on a big conference call. Everybody looks at their own tool, looks at their own piece. So the network guy is looking at their tool, the virtualization guy is looking at their tool, the Citrix guy is looking at the Citrix tool, and everybody is looking at their own piece of this puzzle. Everybody is kind of right, but nobody gets the entire picture. Nobody sees the whole elephant or the whole infrastructure the way it's supposed to be seen and the way it's actually working. And that means, more often than not, this is where they end up. I'm sure most of you on the call are familiar with this problem and being blamed for something else that has happened in the environment. A lot of times, until you have to go in and prove it's not your problem for somebody else to even take a look. So what happens because of this is, as this IDC report judges, in your meantime to repair, the most amount of time and money is actually being spent in isolation and diagnosing of problems, not fixing them, isolation and diagnosis of problems. So that's where most of your time is spent. So once you figure out where the problem is or what is the problem, it's easier for one to fix. But the challenge is figuring out exactly where the problem is. Now, let's look at the tools that are out there that are trying to help us. These two are good tools from Citrix. EdgeSight, it gives you, people have been using EdgeSight for quite some time now, so you know its strengths and weaknesses. It gives you long-term trending and performance tools that can help you do service levels, help you find long-term configuration problems, or do long-term reporting. And it's coming out with, Citrix is coming out with Director that's giving you, supposed to give you real-time analysis of user sessions and what is going on from a Citrix perspective on the user sessions. While these are really good, they are still looking at pieces of the entire ecosystem, not the entire ecosystem. And let me illustrate how. Now, if you look at the combination of EdgeSight and Director, EdgeSight for long-term and Director for real-time, you're still focused on Citrix components. You're still focused on Xen components. Essentially, you're looking at what is going on right at the Citrix layer and the support Citrix servers. So that gives you visibility, but the visibility is limited to the Citrix layer alone. well, it's great to know what's going on in Citrix, but not having the complete end-to-end visibility means you're not able to correlate what's going on with Citrix with what's being affected from a user experience perspective, or if there is another problem somewhere else, for example, like Active Directory slowing down your Citrix farm, you're not able to see that. So essentially, you have a lot of blind spots. So this is where we mostly end up with. There are a lot of different layers and applications and systems, a lot of potential areas that could break, and at this point we're trying to figure out where is the cause as opposed to the effect, because a bunch of things seems to be going wrong. Now enter EG, how do we help? Now you saw that Citrix was able to, with its tools, plug in a couple of areas in here, but with EG, you're looking at a total end-to-end view. The way a service needs to be monitored for performance in today's environments. A complete end-to-end comprehensive view of all the applications, infrastructure pieces involved, and the user experience combined. So this comprehensive visibility enables us to give you the right kind of data at the right time, and also brings everybody, those 5 guys looking at the elephant from 5 different places, so everybody on the conference call can get on the same page. And we'll talk for a minute quickly about some of the fundamental architecture and best practices EG uses to get here, and I'll walk you through a quick demo. Now, meanwhile, if you have any questions, please feel free to fire away, and we'll be tracking them and we'll be answering them during the session, as Doug mentioned earlier. So with that said, let's talk about performance assurance with EG Enterprise. Now, there are a lot of performance monitoring, performance management tools that are out there. So why is EG different? What do we do that sets us apart and makes us successful? So what the key for that is in the 3 towers that you're looking at in front of you. Infrastructure performance tower. Now, most of the monitoring solutions out there today focus on this area because everybody understands infrastructure performance is important. If your infrastructure breaks down, it's going to potentially impact everything down the line. However, looking at infrastructure performance is only one piece of the puzzle. EG looks at infrastructure and its performance in depth, but not in isolation, but in relation to the services that are running on top. No matter what's going on from an infrastructure perspective, it's important how the services are running on top of the infrastructure, and that's what you really care about. How is my service doing? Not if the server is up or down. As long as your service is up and your service is functioning the way it's supposed to function, that's what you care about. So we don't just look at infrastructure performance, we also look at service performance and how that service is being delivered from the infrastructure. What are the different pieces that are interconnected? What relationships do they have to deliver this service successfully? So a comprehensive view of infrastructure performance and a comprehensive view of service performance and how they are interconnected gives us a much bigger picture. And the last piece, which is the most critical piece, is the end user experience. Ultimately, your infrastructure could be great, your service performance could be great, but if the end user experience is bad, then you're not succeeding. Essentially, you're not delivering value to your customers. So it's critical for you to also understand end user experience from a service performance perspective. So services, infrastructure is doing good, service is doing it. How is the end user experience when they're trying to use the service? So we have to take that into account and put it all together in one single solution so you can get a comprehensive picture of what is going on end to end. Our ability to do that, our architecture and our patterns to be able to do that sets us apart from a multitude of solutions that you see out there that focus on essentially different pieces of the infrastructure, like a virtualization piece or a storage piece or a network piece, or different services like a Citrix service or a database service or an application service. Our ability to look at all these 3 key performance towers and look at them as correlated pieces and how the service is being delivered to the end user. Gives us all the ability to do the user experience management, total performance visibility, alert preemptively, diagnose automatically, and help you get better ROI with right sizing. Now, with that said, let's talk about 3 steps to becoming a Citrix performance hero. So I'm going to use the solution to illustrate the 3 fundamental steps that you need to do to make sure you can manage the complexity of the XenApp infrastructures and Xen desktop infrastructures today. The first thing, first and foremost, is monitoring services, not silos. And let me explain the difference there. Now, essentially, users are always talking about user experience, application views, and service views. For them, they care about the service. If it's slow, if it's not working, if it has a problem, then they have a problem. Whereas from an infrastructure perspective, the IT teams predominantly, traditionally focuses on infrastructure metrics. How many connections do I have in TCP? How much CPU am I consuming? Or do I have any packet drops? Now, they don't really talk the same language. While the infrastructure team obsesses on infrastructure and IT team obsesses on infrastructure, the users are obsessing on service. You need to be able to bring them together. The bridge that is created between these 2 teams usually inhibit success for transformational initiatives like delivering desktops, making it successful, making these transformational initiatives accepted across the entire organization. The solution for this problem is looking at the entire service. And you will see an example of how this is done. I'm going to show it to you while logging into EG. Now, while I do that, Doug, any questions you want to prompt from the audience?
You bet. You bet. We have a couple here. Actually, we have a bunch of them, but I'll get to a couple, and then we'll let you demo, and then we'll take a little bit more time and ask some more. Is there a way to monitor client to network?
Yes. So essentially, there are a couple of approaches where EG has the ability to identify where the client is coming from, and then test the network latency from the destination to the host, from the host. Now, if that's one approach, and another approach that's applicable in other environments is we would have what we would call a probe in additional environments, in remote environments, from where we would test the connectivity into the data center, similar to how a user would be using their connectivity into the data center. And we also track the ICA latency for each and every client session. So there are multiple approaches where we gather client latency.
Perfect. And then here's a longer question. Do we need to move my mic a little bit closer so I can see this? Do we need to have a single service account which will be having access to all the domains and devices, which is virtually impossible to have to get this thing going? Then how one installation will resolve things like EdgeSight or Director?
Excellent question, actually. This is a question that is, it's a fundamental question that will arise in most of the environments. So the answer to that question is, more often than not, you won't be able to get every single piece in, but you need to try to get as many pieces as possible into that entire service view. That is going to give you the ability to look at the environment in a much more comprehensive way than you've been looking at today. Otherwise, you're still stuck in looking piecemeal information. So once you have it, what the approach that we have seen in most of our customers that has been successful is we call it land and expand. Essentially, we go in with the solution and an approach for a small subset of the environment. So it could be the Citrix and environments that are very closely tied to the Citrix, like the backend databases and a couple of other front-end pieces. Once you have that comprehensively covered, and you can establish the data that is coming out of it, and you can comprehensively prove where the problem is within that realm, everybody starts to buy in on that concept organizationally, and it becomes more of a service-oriented approach where everybody understands, hey, every time there is a problem, they have this view which tells them it's right here or it's not in that space that they're looking at. So that means I want to be in on it too, and then it starts growing and gets bigger and bigger. And one point I want to make is it's not needed for you to have this piece on all the clients or the client sites. The focus here is really on the data center side and making sure you have it all, have it on most of the pieces that is needed on the data center side.
Hey, Balak, another question that came up, basically a two-part question, which is, do you support virtualized XenApp environments, and can you do performance monitoring for them? That's the first part. Second part is, if so, what virtualization platforms, what hypervisors do you support?
Okay, good question. And yes, we had covered it in a slide before. We do support virtualized XenApp environments, and we support multiple different types of virtualization. It could be Xen virtualization, ESX virtualization, Hyper-V virtualization, or Red Hat virtualization. Most of the AAX, most of the popular virtualization platforms that are out there, we cover. And we also cover physical systems, but predominantly we are seeing XenApps being run on ESX or Xen or Hyper-V, and we support all of those.
Cool, thank you.
Perfect. Sure. We have one more question here from the audience that I want to get to, and then I'll let you get back at it, and we have tons more. So one of the most difficult problems, and this really gets to the root of this whole conversation, really, one of the most difficult problems to troubleshoot is slow response in Xen Desktop. There are just so many moving parts involved. If storage is slow, the symptoms are felt across the network, the hypervisor target devices. How does your product decipher which components is the root cause?
That's an excellent question, and
Truly.
The way I'm going to answer that question is using this demonstration. And you will be able to, in this demonstration, see an user experience issue on the front end where the users are having a problem, and you'll be able to see how the software can analyze the data end to end, look at the different pieces that are breaking down, and focus you on the right piece where the problem is coming from. Without much further ado, I'm going to log into the system. Now, I am connecting into a cloud-based view here. This environment is run on the cloud. It's a demo system in the sense that we've kept some things broken so we can show you how EG can diagnose what's broken. Other than that, it's a real-time system that I'm connecting into in real time. So as soon as I connect, as you see here, there are a couple of screens that pop up. One is the alarm window that tells me all the problems that I currently have with the priority, so I know exactly what I need to focus on. For now, let's minimize that, and I want to look at the dashboard. Now, this dashboard gives me the health of the infrastructure from various different perspectives. So these are system-based health, these are actual metrics and how many of them are doing good or not, and key metrics that are misbehaving. Now, I want to focus on the service view here, and that's pertinent to the demo and the question, Doug, you had asked. So I was talking about looking at everything as a service rather than a silo, understanding all the different applications that are working together, managing and monitoring all of them, understanding the service that is running on top, and the user experience. So this is the result of that. You are seeing two services being monitored that way. One is green, that means good. The other one is not green, that means something is going on there. The darker the shade of red, the more severe the problem is. In this case, it's orange, so it's a medium priority issue. So let's drill down to see what's really going on there. In this case, there have been problems where application access is 100% failing. User login is 100% failing. So there is a significant user experience issue here. The front end is having a big issue. This is typically when you will be getting calls from your customers, or your software tools are going to say, hey, there are problems. you know these parts of the service are failing. This is the user experience problem. However, with EG, as you notice, it's been marked as pink. So we are saying this is a minor problem because this is an effect of a problem somewhere else in the infrastructure. So something else is broken in the infrastructure that is rippling through the infrastructure that's causing this problem. So we've reduced the priority of this so you can focus on the actual problem. So let's drill down, see what's really going on. And what you see here is a very simple XenApp topology. So this XenApp has got some print server, file server, SQL servers, and the front end, network device, and all those different pieces. And you can see that health of different pieces are illustrated here. And you can see which components are doing well and which applications are not doing well. In this case, XenApp seems to be having a problem. So the problem XenApp, so we started from the user experience. From the user experience, now we are into the service view, that is end-to-end service view. Now let me drill into XenApp and see what the problem is. Now I'm in the infrastructure view. It shows me that XenApp is actually part of an ESX host, which seems to be having a bigger problem. So I drill down, and the layer model is presented to me that is clearly describing which layer has a problem within this ESX host. And it's clearly the operating system layer. Virtual CPU utilization of console is 100%. The console operating system is taking up all its CPU. Let's drill down to see what processes are running that's causing that. Samba backup. So let's recap. Somebody is running backup on the ESX host. That's choking the CPU on the host, ergo choking the CPU on the XenApp servers that's running on top, and people weren't able to connect or launch applications or do anything quickly on the front end from a Citrix user perspective. So when the users are calling you saying, I can't log in, my environment is really slow, backup on an ESX host is not the first thing that really comes to your mind. That's why end-to-end service view is so critical in managing performance in these environments. Now, this means your 24/7 operator can quickly click through and get to this. They don't have to be ESX experts or Citrix experts. They know that this is where the problem is because that's what's read. Now, I walked you through the entire sequence to give you a perspective of how the solution is laid out. In reality, remember the alarm window that we minimized earlier? That has all this information. So it's telling me that physical CPU on ESX is high, Citrix is choking on CPU, the XenApp that's running on the ESX host, and the real problem is CPU utilization on console. From here directly, I can click on diagnosis and get to the process that is causing the CPU consumption. And better still, this can be sent as an email to the actual ESX administrator or sent into your troubleshooting system to open up a trouble ticket. So nobody has to intervene with the system for this to be alerting on. And more importantly, this would have happened when the CPU utilization was at, let's say, 70% instead of at 100%. Then you would have had time to be able to react and hopefully prevent this user experience issue. And last but not least, after the demo, I'm going to give you another slot for a couple of questions. So feel free to type in your questions now. I want to illustrate one point here. Now, it's all great that we are able to find out exactly where the problem is. You can see that we're collecting a lot of metrics here. Now, collecting metrics can be done by a lot of different tools. It's not rocket science. You could have 4 or 5 different tools collect all the metrics that EG collects from the different areas of the environment. But at the end of the day, when you have those segregate tools looking at segregate environments, this is, even if you correlate all those events, this is what you will end up with. You will end up with 5 or 6 events, in this case 7 events that have been triggered by one problem. one problem has triggered 7 different events in your environment, and the onus becomes on you to try and figure out. If you notice in this alarm window, I've hidden the priority, so the onus becomes on you to figure out. So you might potentially be looking at these 7 alerts in 5 different tools or 7 different tools. So ESX might be saying there is a backup that is running that's supposed to run at 2 o'clock, but it's running at 4 o'clock, and the guy who will be looking at it is, okay, it's running 2 hours late, no big deal. For them, that's it. That's their level of attention that they pay to it. And you see that CPU is choking on some systems, so that's a completely different problem from an ESX perspective. But in reality, you are still faced with 7 or 8 different problems that you have to figure out which one would I start. Which is the most important problem that I need to address now? Where do I focus the efforts of my team? Which one should get the highest priority? Or should I be focused on all 7 alerts? Imagine these 7 alerts out of one problem. Imagine in a large production environment when things start really going wrong, how busy this could get. And if you're looking at 5 different tools, trying to put all of this manually together, you might eventually get there, but you put your users through a large amount of user experience issues, a lot of problems, and you've got your high-skilled engineers working on problems that doesn't really matter to them. So you're making the complex environment even more complex. But by having this under one single umbrella, by looking at it from a service perspective, all that data turns into information. In EG's case, actionable information, where we are saying, hey, all of these alerts are there, but focus on the critical alert on top. That's where your real problem is. And that's fundamentally what makes these complex environments easier to manage. By having this view, by having this technology, being able to do this, being able to do all of this automatically. With that, I'm going to go back to the slide. This is a very short overview of a quick trailer, if you will, of EG. If you're interested, we can do a much more comprehensive demonstration for your team later on. Reach out to us. However, I just wanted to use this to illustrate why looking at this environment as a service is so much more efficient and so much more important than looking at this environment as individual silos. So with that, I'm going to go back to the slide deck, and while I do that, Doug, do we have more questions?
We have a lot more questions, absolutely. So, and guys, like Bala said, if you guys want to have more information, you can always just leave us a quick question saying, hey, give me more information, and these guys will get that, and they can follow up with you after the webinar. Easy and quick way to get their attention. So on that note, let's dive into these questions. How can this tool monitor profile load and storage latency issues?
Yes, as I was showing in the demo, we have monitoring for all those different application pieces, more than 140 different types of application pieces as of today. So we have in-depth monitoring for profile loading for different types of users. We have in-depth monitoring for storage devices and in-depth monitoring for how ESX consumes those storage devices. So all those data and metric is actually collected in EG. And better still, it's analyzed. So if there is a slowdown in the storage device and that's causing your VMs to slow down, instead of pointing at your VM, EG will be able to point at your storage device and say, hey, that's where your real problem is.
Perfect. The next question is a long question. I have a question. Well, Bala has an answer. How much effort is it to plug this tool into the other layers / environments? My team has full control over the Citrix environment, but we do not manage the Active Directory environment, network environment, etc. I would anticipate some backlash from the other teams, potentially if my Citrix team asks the other teams to install this tool in their environment. Essentially, will I need buy-in from the other teams related to each layer?
That's actually a very good question. So the way to work around that problem is what we call as black box monitoring. So when we would instrument EG fully in the environment that you have control over. And in the environments that you don't have control over, we would instrument what we call black box monitoring. Essentially, we would track service level from those outside environments. Depending on the type of environment, we'll track different types of service levels. So what this will enable us to do is we will be able to, using our correlations, still track where the problem is. If it's inside your environment, we'll get deep down into the problem and say this is exactly the problem. But it's outside. If it's outside the control of your environment, then we'll be able to, using our black box monitoring, say, hey, your Citrix environment is doing great, your database environment is doing great, your applications are doing great, but your Active Directory is not doing so great because it has become, the response time has dropped, or the packets have been dropping from there, or the requests are not being met at the requisite time. So your problem is in the Active Directory space. We'll be able to point to it and say that's where your problem is. Since we don't have full-fledged monitoring, we might not be able to drill down, as I showed in the demo, and said this is exactly where the problem is, but we'll be able to show you that's where the problem is, not in your environment. So essentially, you would be monitoring as much as possible in your environment from your control perspective, and if you have buy-in from other teams. In a lot of cases, EG doesn't need agents installed everywhere. We have a fully agentless solution that is available that does pretty much everything an agent-based solution does. So you could do this agentlessly, and you could collect statistics from a lot of different places without having to get too much buy-in from the other teams. But at the same time, you still have this black box methodology that allows you to focus on the environments that you control and make sure you do it in depth. But at the same time, the environments that you don't control but that are part of your service, you keep a tab on them by using the black box monitoring. So when they cause your problem, you can always go back to them and show the data and say, you causing my problem, I'm doing fine here. So essentially what we are giving you is still the ability to quickly diagnose the problems, get to the bottom of it, but instead of getting to that actual metric and actual layer, you will be passing it on to the team that says, hey, that server is having a problem. I don't know exactly what the problem is, but that server is slowing down way slower than it's supposed to be, or that server is not reachable and it's causing problems to my service delivery. So instead of now scrambling into your environment, you still know exactly where the problem is.
Perfect, perfect. And we have a bunch more questions. I want to make sure that we give you time to finish your slides and your presentation. So please let me know if we'll ask another one. If we have time, we'll continue going. If not, then we'll definitely finish answering these questions at the top of the hour. So
right, I think
go ahead.
I probably it's going to be 5 more minutes, I would think. But there are a couple of other points that I want to cover. So let's cover that and then go back to the questions again.
Sounds perfect. Have at it.
Okay. So to summarize what we looked at from a service perspective, the EG Xen Service Manager kind of acts like your general practitioner, if you will. You go to EG whenever you have a problem, and it diagnoses and tells you exactly where the problem is. So it knows your history, it does all the correlation, it manages your environment, so it knows where your problem is. So most of the time, it tells you exactly where to go to find the problem. And in some cases where it's not able to figure out, where it doesn't have the access, it'll point you in that direction and say, that's where you need to go. Go to that. In this case, relating to the previous question, it's the Active Directory problem. Go to the Active Directory team and deal with them there. Their issue is trickling into your environment and causing a user experience problem. So with that, let me go to the next point, which is, so we're talking about 3 steps to become Citrix performance superhero. So the first step is really making sure you have a service view, not a silo view, but a service view when it comes to performance monitoring. And the second step is right sizing. Right sizing is fundamental, and it's something that you need to be striving for constantly, because it directly relates to your ROI and also to your user experience. So understand the usage patterns, trends of how the users are using your environment, which business unit is consuming most of your environment, how the patterns are, what time of the day is very busy for you, what resource is most taxed. Understanding these patterns and managing those patterns effectively gives you a bigger bang for buck in terms of ROI. Understanding load balancing. I mean, it's pretty straightforward and simple, but if you're not managing load balancing constantly, and if you're not getting alerted if load balancing is queued in your environment, then you're overstressing part of your environment, compromising your user experience while not efficiently using your infrastructure that is available. So this is an example of an environment that's not quite load balanced. And let's look at another example where understanding bottlenecks is critical. I mean, we've all gone through a phase of adding infrastructure pieces just to get over a problem at some point in our career. But that's not usually the long-term way to success. When you have a potential issue, it's important for you to understand where the bottleneck is before throwing hardware at it. You're looking at an example here where we are looking at number of VMs or number of desktops that can be added to a particular cluster based on the amount of CPU that's available and amount of memory that's available. You can clearly see that based on CPU available, there are a lot more desktops that can be added here, but based on memory available, there's only 3 that can be added. So the bottleneck is clearly memory. So in this case, all you need to do essentially is to increase the memory that's available on this cluster. That means then you will be able to get 19 more VMs or 19 more desktops onto this environment and use the current hardware much more efficiently. That impacts your ROI directly, and it doesn't compromise your user experience. Both are great things to have. So constantly striving for better utilization by understanding the pattern, by patterns of utilization, understanding where your bottlenecks are is critical to get better resource utilization and better ROI in your environment. Now, the third point I want to talk about is being preemptive about it. I'll keep this short, but this is extremely important. Now, it's great when you're able to find out where the problem is when the user experience issue crops up, understand where exactly the problem is so you can quickly fix and keep the mean time to response really low. That's great. That means your user experience always stays high. But what's even better is if you're able to circumvent that and actually prevent user experience problems from even happening. So that means you are taking your performance management to the next level. That's where you need to be. That's where most of our customers are. So essentially, to be able to do that preemptively, some of the fundamental things you need is you need broad coverage. There is no two ways about it. You need a solution that can cover a broad spectrum of things, your storage devices, your applications, your Xen servers, your virtualization pieces, the profile loads. All of these need to be covered efficiently. And you have to be able to go deep into certain areas, deep visibility into all the key areas where performance is impacted. For example, user session. What's going on within a user session? What are the different types of processes they're running? How they're consuming the resources? And what kind of latency they're having? What kind of stress they're putting on other users? All of this is key. And that kind of deep insight needs to be available on all the key pieces. So you need a solution that can go broad, that can go deep. And you need to have the right domain expertise. It's not, okay, I've got a perfmon tool that can collect that data. I've got another tool that can collect that data. Then I'll put a wrapper around it and then try to correlate it. That's not very efficient. And then you need to have the ability to auto baseline. So essentially understand how an environment behaves over a period of time and build baselines based on it. So what this does is it makes deployment much easier. It makes using the solution much easier, and more importantly, it sets thresholds based on the behavior in your environment. So that means it understands normalcy in your environment and sets thresholds accordingly. So what that does is when your environment goes out of normal, then you can get an early alert. And that's typically when problem starts, when your environment goes out of normal. A normal backup that's supposed to run at 2 o'clock in the morning starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. That's out of normal. And if you get an alert as soon as that starts happening, then you have the ability to go in and do something about that backup so you can prevent that from impacting end user experience. I'm going to show you an example of how that works within EG. It's very difficult to get these examples because people usually catch the problems and take care of it, so you don't have anything to really see. But in this case, this was a unique scenario where you can see that a server has failed and it has been rebooted at 1340. Now, if you notice the alert right below it, EG has been screaming with a critical priority alert that there is a memory leak on that system 5 hours ahead of time. So 5 hours ahead of time, there was an alert, a critical alert saying there was a memory leak on the system. Now, if the process was set up correctly and it was properly being followed, this would have been received and opened as a ticket or an email to the concerned person so they can look at it and they could have done something about it. Instead, in that particular situation, the process wasn't followed and the server restarted. But the point here really is you had a warning 5 hours before a user experience or user impacting event happened. So if you are heeding to those warnings, you are essentially preemptively fixing problems before they start impacting users, and that's where you need to be. Now, with that said, a quick summary of what EG delivers. So we looked at the 3 steps for becoming a Citrix performance hero, and we covered some of the key things that you need to do there. And we used the EG solution to demonstrate that. So you get 360-degree performance visibility, automatic root cause diagnosis, preemptive problem detection and alerting, and better ROI and service assurance, and make rapid ROI. So all of the metrics that you saw, the monitoring models that you saw, all of that come pre-canned, so you don't have to build any models, you don't have to set thresholds. All of this come turnkey with EG, so it's very quick to deliver. And one comment on future is virtualization, and a lot of desktops being virtualized, servers already being virtualized, and Citrix XenApp in this mix. So you need a solution that understands virtualized XenApp, understands VDI, understands all the support servers, and understands how Xen Desktop 7 and future direction of Citrix is. And EG provides you coverage in all of those different areas and brings simplicity to managing this complex infrastructure. These are 4 different areas through which we improve ROI for you and your end customers. Boost user satisfaction and productivity. Reducing downtime means users are not wasting time, users are not struggling with slowing down applications. Reducing IT support costs and complexity. This is huge. You don't have 4 or 5 of your critical resources firefighting all the time, because now you know exactly where things are, and the complexity of your infrastructure is reduced. Reduce infrastructure costs by managing usage patterns and avoid cost overruns. And having simplicity brought to this management means it's easier to manage this environment. That means your IT folks can do their actual IT projects rather than being focused on firefighting all the time. With that, Doug, all yours. I'll throw it back for Q&A.
Perfect. And as always, we do respect everybody's time out there, so it is the top of the hour. If you have another appointment, then, push it off because we have Q&A time, right? But if you do need to leave, Definitely, we appreciate your time today. Bala, thank you so much. I really enjoyed your presentation, and now we're going to get to the Q&A, which is my favorite part. So we've asked Bala a bunch of them, but we have just a slew of questions from you guys. Please feel free to continue asking them, and Bala's going to stick around until we get them all answered, no matter what he wants. So, not now. He wants to sit here and do questions. So, first question. Will this tool provide capacity planning and sizing information?
Yes, I think we saw an example of that earlier in the webinar where we showed because of the bottleneck you have, you are doing future sizing for how many desktops can I add to a particular cluster, and it showed a bottleneck in memory. So yes, capacity planning and information on future planning will be provided with EG.
Excellent. I always love this question, although I never know the answer because I always say, I'm an engineer. I don't know how things work or license. So the question is licensing. How is this product licensed? Okay,
very good question. And in short, it's licensed a couple of ways. We have a user-based licensing that most of you in the Citrix, I mean, pretty much all of you in the Citrix world is quite familiar with. And we also have server-based licensing, which could be very cost-effective if your user density on each server is quite high. So we have a couple of approaches you can go with.
Perfect. Does this require extra resources on existing infrastructure, or just have to install your tool on the existing servers to make it work?
Yes, that's all you need to do. You just have to install our tool. If you want to go with the agent-based approach, it's just a piece of software, and you drop it on the systems, and it starts running and starts monitoring, collecting statistics, populating to the manager, and doing all the stuff that it's supposed to do automatically. And if it's agentless, you don't even drop it on the system. We connect remotely and collect all these statistics. And it does not require anything specific to be added to the system that you already have. You just need to add the software to it. It is very, in terms of resource consumption, it's very, very minimalistic, or very, very concerned of the amount of resource it consumes. So everything is hyper-threaded and cleaned up within our solution. That means at any given time, you'll see CPU utilization between 0.2 to 1%. You would hardly see that go above 1% on an average. So you would hardly even notice that it's running.
Perfect. Next question. So what is the architecture design requirement to monitor not only XenApp, not only a XenApp farm, but a VMware ESX environment also?
It is the same architecture. That's the nice thing about it. There is the manager piece, and there is a database piece. And the database is where we store all the data. Manager is where you connect and collect all the information, where agent connects and dumps all the data. So that's the interface piece that we had connected to earlier in the demonstration. And whether it's ESX or Xen server or physical servers or Solaris or Exchange, whatever you might have, it's the same management console, it's the same architecture, and it also scales horizontally. So it's already a high capacity system that can handle thousands and thousands of users and thousands of systems that you might have. And it doesn't matter if it's a virtualized farm or a physical farm or a combination of both. It's all under the single umbrella. And that's one of the main advantages, where it makes it simple. You don't have to look at a virtualization tool to understand virtualization, and then look at a Citrix tool to see what's going on in Citrix, and then you look at a physical tool to look at what's going on in your physical system. All of that is brought together under one single pane.
Perfect, perfect. And guys, if you have a follow-up question or Bala just wasn't able to answer your question, please just use the questions piece and ask a follow-up, and we'll get to it. So next question. From your experience, your pre-sales experience, what is the best approach to avoid, the issue with every team buying their own silo monitoring solution?
Okay.
That's a good one, isn't it? I'm sorry?
Say that again?
Yeah, basically the question is, from your pre-sales experience, what is the best approach to stop the process of, internally at a company, you have different teams, maybe the network team, the database team, the storage team, the Citrix team, and everyone's out there buying their own monitoring solution. So in return, you have a siloed solution for networking, a siloed solution for Citrix.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what's a great pre-sales way of preventing that and saying, hey, you need one solution instead of everyone having their own?
It's the fundamental question of how do you get to the problem quicker and how can you resolve it faster? And that can happen only if you bring everybody to the same page. Today's applications are no longer working from one system to the end user. It's no longer the case of end user connecting to a server and that's all he works with. No, the end user is connecting to a service, and that service is spread across all different types of servers in your environment. So if you still go by the silo approach, you are probably 15, 20 years back in terms of performance management. And if you stay there, you're not going to be able to catch up with the complexity of the applications today. And what you will have is constant troubleshooting calls where you would have 5 different guys from 5 different teams on the phone trying to troubleshoot a simple problem, but everybody looking at their own tool. It's an enormous waste in terms of their time, and more importantly, while everybody's doing that, the customer is still suffering. So it's a fundamentally important difference that people have to understand, and a lot of companies are turning around to this idea now. They are beginning to become, a lot of companies are already there, a lot of companies are trying to get there. I think from a pre-sales perspective, the best way I would say that is if you don't do this, you're not future-proofing your company. You're not putting in a performance management platform that can deal with the current infrastructure and the current services, and it's going to be much worse in future. Already it's much worse because none of the open systems work just one-to-one to a user. So if you don't have a solution that looks at, a single solution that looks at multiple pieces in your environment, you're just using the wrong set of technologies, and you're always going to constantly have user problems, and you're going to constantly waste your resources while they're trying to firefight rather than doing their projects.
That's really a good question. There's a lot of times we think about selling into a corporation, but internally, we have our champions, and they need to sell within their corporation. There's always those, the departments out there and the naysayers and the guys that want to do it themselves, and you just can't do that. You need to have that holistic approach and a view into your environment, and then you can solve major problems, not just siloed problems, right? So next question, is there a NetScaler SDX visibility?
Yes. We do have full visibility into NetScaler performance metrics and what is going on in there. And we currently work very closely with Citrix. So that means any new release that they come up with, we get the pre-release and we are able to work with them to understand what is changed and what needs to be focused on. And NetScaler has become a big piece going forward with Xen Desktop 7. So we have full-fledged support. In fact, our full-fledged support for Xen Desktop 7 is scheduled to be released very quickly. I'm not giving exact dates, but in about 4 to 6 weeks.
Perfect. Next question, where can we find pricing information for this product?
Please reach out to us, and we'll talk to you and give you the right information you need.
Okay. Next, named or concurrent user-based licensing?
We have both.
Perfect.
Hey, should we select details for the folks that want to reach out after the Q&A if they have any questions that they haven't submitted yet? Yeah, I think that will help.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Now, I just put up the follow-up
yes.
information stuff, so they can look at this. If you have any further questions or anything that we didn't get to and you want to reach out to us, please feel free to. The contact information is right up there.
Perfect, perfect. And definitely visit the website and check it out in more detail for sure. I like this one. Is there comprehensive training for partners and or end users so that we can get our engineers trained and certified on this product?
I'm sorry, you broke up for a second.
Yeah, no problem. Do you have comprehensive training for partners and end users so
Correct.
that we can get our... Yep.
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Which other tools in the market do you compete with? And I'll add, and how do you compare and contrast to those guys? You don't have to name names. You know, I'm more interested in... sorry, guys, that asked the question, but I'm more interested. How do you compete? You know, why should we care about what EG is bringing versus, you know, the competition?
So that's the fundamental value that I'll restate again, because there are a lot of monitoring tools out there, and a lot of them are really good. But in reality, they're looking at one of those three different tiers. They're either looking at the infrastructure tier or the service tier, or they're coming at it from a completely user experience perspective. Each of them has their own merits, but if you don't put all of that together, you're still looking at an incomplete picture that doesn't enable you to understand what's going on in your environment completely comprehensively. And that's where most of the tools are. There are tools that do Citrix only very well. There are tools from Citrix that do that very well. There are tools that do virtualization only very well. There are tools that do hardware network only very well. There are tools that do user experience only very well. But there are no tools that are out there that do all of this well and be able to correlate that data and turn it into information for you, and that's what EG does. Essentially, look at it this way. How complex has the management gotten in these environments? It's not a simple thing anymore. And even one problem could cause ripple effects and break 20 different things. It's not a simple thing anymore. All of us could use any help we can get. And the last thing we need when a problem happens is 10 different tools and 5 different people looking at those 10 different tools. I want one place that will tell me exactly what's going on and where do I need to go. And that makes management of this infrastructure, management of this technology easier for me, and that's what I need. I need this to be simpler for me so I can be successful here, and that's what EG delivers.
Absolutely. Amen to that. That's so correct. So the next question is really, I think you just answered it, but since it was asked, I will ask it. Application monitoring. Does the tool monitor applications such as SAP or SharePoint in the same level of detail that it does Citrix?
Yes. I can elaborate on that, but yes. We look at SAP in depth. We look at different types of applications. So it's not just a Citrix monitor. It is a monitor for any N-tier application, any application that has multiple tiers and complex interdependencies. May that be a web application, may that be a XenApp application or an SAP application, or any other different type of application that you might have in your environment. We support Java, we support Microsoft, we support in our website there is a comprehensive list of different platforms that we support that you can look at. Pretty much most of the stuff that you have, we would support. And for the stuff that we don't support, that you built yourself, we have something called as integration console that will take that app, that custom app you built, and start monitoring it within minutes without you having to write any code.
Excellent, excellent. And then I like this question too. A Microsoft pre-sales consultant would say that all you need to do is buy and implement System Center to get all the service monitoring for your whole infrastructure. How do you respond to that? Great question, isn't it?
Yes. And,
we do everything.
Yes, and that's basically if you listen to most of those, I would say maybe top 3, top 4 platform vendors, your Microsoft, your IBM, your HP, that's what they're going to say. They're going to say, I do everything. Now, if you break down that sentence and get to the nitty-gritty of it, you might have to buy 20 different tools and spend 3 years of consulting time and put in a lot of effort to build a system that by the time it's finished, it's outdated anyway, then you have to go through another cycle. What they have is a big platform that's cobbled together by buying multiple tools that are not fully integrated. So essentially what you have is a platform that they can claim that they can do, but ultimately you have a platform that doesn't do correlation automatically. So application level correlation doesn't happen. We can go into the details of how many things that they don't do, but fundamentally that's essentially what System Center is good way to aggregate event log and perf counter metrics, and it has its benefits. It does its management function. When it comes to monitoring, it can aggregate metrics from other tools, and that can be done well too. But ultimately, as I said earlier, collecting metrics is not that big of a deal. But how do you change that data into information is where real secret sauce comes in, is real value comes in there. How can you change the metric into information? So that's what we specialize in, and that's what you won't get there. Hey, Doug, you there?
I was on mute and I was just chatting away. So thank you for bringing that up. I would have gone on forever. So the next question is more of a statement, and I really appreciate this. Be sure to record the very good Q&A part also. Thank you very much. Very good. And I personally thank you guys for sticking around and listening to the Q&A and asking all the questions that we get. That's one of the things I do with DABCC live webinars that I find different than a lot of webinars is we really want you guys to be interactive so that we can meet your objectives and we can answer your questions versus just stand up here or sit in our desks and do a webinar and preach to ourselves more or less. So this is an audience participation project and we love it. So we definitely record this piece, and we have a few more questions. We're going to stick around and get them all answered. So if you guys have more, please feel free. This is your time. Ball is an expert at this, and what more can we ask? So I appreciate that. I appreciate your comment, your questions, and let's keep on moving. So if I can get to okay, what about the Splunk approach? What do you think about that? Big data.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and Splunk approach is actually pretty good, and it has its benefits. But again, you need to look at Splunk as a smaller part of the bigger solution, because Splunk has the ability to crunch a lot of data, but the data that they can crunch is mostly in the log files, and the way they can crunch data is they can make noise that is a lot of data, make it simpler, but you have to build the rules. You have to tell Splunk how to do this. You have to build all the rules that go into Splunk. So while it's effective, while it reduces the amount of log file that you have to parse through, the amount of event logs you have to parse through, makes it efficient, but still you are providing the knowledge, you are providing the intelligence, if you will, and you can only provide so much of it. And by the time so that means all the rules that are built in is through you, and you can do that for event log and for log files, but you can't really do that for performance monitoring, for real-time data that keeps changing, and how much data, how many users are coming into a session. And if that changes, how many users are logged into a particular application, and what happens to the CPU consumption of that application, and if that changes it. So for example, EG can do the following. EG can understand that 11 o'clock on 11 a.m. on a Monday morning is the peak demand time on a particular Citrix infrastructure. So that means that's when the most number of users are logged on, most number of applications are running, and most amount of resources are consumed. It could be a CPU resource, it could be a memory, whatever the case might be. So we know that's your peak. So that means it automatically trends itself and thresholds itself, observing all these metrics on these different systems, and says, I know Monday morning 11 a.m. is your peak, and maybe Tuesday afternoon 4 o'clock is your lowest time. And for some reason, suddenly you start getting twice the amount of traffic that you're supposed to get on Tuesday. At the low time, you're getting a lot of traffic that you're not supposed to get. So that's a significant change in behavior. It's not something that you can write a rule ahead of time and then try to predict. So this is something where the software understands the norm of your environment and says, this is different from normal. There are a lot of people are coming in, or a lot of activity is going on. Maybe an antivirus scan that's not supposed to run now has started running and it's choking the I/O on your disk. Something like that can be caught in real time by the solution when we are looking at all these performance metrics. So I know it was a long answer to that question, but I just wanted to clarify.
That's a very good answer, Bala. Absolutely, big data is really changing the world, right? It's definitely the way we look at, crunching numbers and data
Yep.
and things like that. I mean, look at a company like Oracle. What's their future? Not that Oracle's going anywhere, but it really changes the whole database world too. But at the same time, like you said, it's a very manual process, and what you guys have been doing for a long time is big data. You're pumping all this data in, and then you're doing all the calculations to spit out the correct, the information we need, right?
Correct. And the data comes in as intelligent data and becomes intelligent information for the user, and the way it's collected, the way it's manipulated, all of that is important. While distilling data at the core level is important, it's a piece of the puzzle, but the entire solution to the puzzle is making sure you're collecting right data at all the right levels and managing that data, converting that data into information at all the right levels on a performance sphere, looking at it end to end. So it's a lot more involved process, and that's why you need something like EG.
You bet. Okay, I have a few more questions, and we might break the record on longest webinar that I've had, thanks to all these great questions. So what extra load will EG Innovations put on a Citrix server? What's your memory footprint, CPU footprint, things like that?
Okay, so as I touched on this earlier, we are very, very lightweight. We focus on being lightweight and not impacting the systems we're running. So typically our CPU footprint is anywhere between 0.2 to 1%, so you would hardly see it even at 1% on an average. So it's very, very lightweight. And from a memory standpoint, depending on what we are doing, we might be using anywhere between 40 MB to maybe 80 MB of memory. So it's, again, lightweight over there. So it's a very, very lightweight engine that doesn't impact the system it runs on.
Perfect. What kind of reports can be pulled out of the, let me read that one again. What kind of reports can be pulled off that look at the disk I/O bottlenecks?
Disk I/O bottlenecks. So every metric we collect is stored in our database, and you can do tons and literally tons of reporting on it. We have management level reports, we have performance reports, we have operation reports for postmortem, we also have capacity reports. So you can basically say, okay, what are my top 10 I/O disks with top 10 I/O, or disks that have the slowest response time, or disks that have met the SLA or not met the SLA over a period of time, or based on the current growth, when will these disks be filled up, or when will the response time become bad enough for me to consider additional disks. All of this information can be got from our reports. So you have tons of reports you can play with and get all the information you need from a as I said earlier, executive perspective, operations perspective, and capacity perspective, and so much more.
Perfect. Do you provide, almost the same line of questioning, do you provide templates for the metrics for different services, servers, things like that?
Yes. If I hadn't touched on that before, yes, that's one of the things that makes EG a lot more easier, because basically when EG discovers that this is a XenApp system, it automatically has a full template on what are the metrics that need to be collected, and it logs in and collects all these metrics and discovers the users automatically, gets into their session, discovers the application, starts monitoring those applications, and it already has thresholds for this stuff. So all these templates are built in. So all you're saying is, hey, go monitor that Citrix server, and all of this data is presented to you. And it's the same for all the different applications we support, the same for an ESX, same for Active Directory, same for SQL Server, and same for applications we support too. So it's very, very easy to use.
Perfect. Do you support automated email reports that will be sent to specific users? And what type of reports do you send?
Yes, and all of them. Any report that you can draw in our system can be sent as a PDF, or can be stored as your favorites, sent as PDF email, and stored as your favorites, and all of our reports support that functionality. And you can even have scheduled reports. Say, for example, you build a report on Citrix Health that looks at your entire service and says, this is my service delivery for the last week. I had on an average 5,000 users, and I consumed 70% of the CPU available in my entire farm, and I did 30% of memory available in my entire farm. You like that report very much, and you can save it and schedule it and say, send it to me once a week, and it'll keep sending it to you once a week. You don't have to log in after that.
Perfect. Can this be integrated into the BMC portal?
Yes, it can be.
Perfect. Doesn't matter what hypervisor I use. We've talked a lot about Citrix, but Hyper-V, KVM, VMware doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Cool. Nothing matters. You guys do it all pretty much. So can EG track back from the user experience issue all the way back to the root cause, no matter where it is in your environment? Loaded question.
Yes. So it is a loaded question. So I was going to say that.
That's the entire webinar, right?
Yes, it's the entire webinar, and I will be upfront and say this. I'm not going to say 100% all the time, but that's the goal for the product. That's how the product is designed. So most of the times, we will be able to track what's going on from a user experience perspective and how it's being impacted, if the impact is because of a service issue or an infrastructure issue, and where that is coming from. And obviously, I won't say it all the time because I'm being candid, and I don't think anybody would say it all the time. So.
Yeah, if you hear 100%, then you just should sort of ignore that person, right? There's no such thing as 100%. Once you get to 100%, then something's new. So last question, and that being said, if you guys have any more questions, please feel free to ask them. But if you don't, then we're going to go ahead and close this webinar down. Very last question. Well, the last question I have. Does your solution rely on any other monitoring tools to collect performance data?
No. As I touched on earlier, we collect all our performance data. We believe in garbage in, garbage out. So if we can't control how the data is collected and how the data is intelligently picked, we can't rely on the results of it. So we collect all our data. We do support in some extreme cases where we have to depend on other tools due to access restrictions, or in some other cases where there is no other way. We do support if there is a situation where we have to collect data from some other tool and put it into our platform. But all in all, we collect our own data. We don't depend on any other tools to do that.
Perfect. And we did have one more question come in. So does it mean that the connectivity to the user will also be monitored? Yeah, you
Yes.
guys are doing user. Yeah, absolutely. And that's our last question. So, Bala, thank you so much for your time today. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I've learned a lot. Thank you guys out there listening, and there's so many of you still listening. That's what always amazes me, how many people stick around for even after the hour. So from me personally to all you guys, thank you so much. And Bala, I'll turn it over to you to give the last word.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, Doug, for the opportunity, and thank the audience, and thanks for the great questions. And the last word pretty much is what we showed here is a teaser, if you will, as there is a solution that is out there that can make your life simpler in this space. And we talked about the 3 important steps to get there, even if you use our solution or not. If you focus on those 3 important steps, that's what's going to make your life easier in managing this complex infrastructure. And with that, I want to say thanks again for everyone, and thanks especially to Doug and Holger, and you guys have a great evening or afternoon or morning, wherever you're listening from.
Absolutely, and thanks everyone. And don't forget, we did record this, so we will get this posted within the next couple days, tops. And and we'll let you guys all know too, so you can share with your friends, your bosses, your wives. If your wives are interested, if they are, please let me know, because my wife is not. But on that note, thanks everyone for listening to this DABCC Live webinar. Definitely head on over to eginnovations.com and have at it. Very neat stuff. So again, thanks everyone for listening to this podcast. Good day, everybody.